Welcome. Thank you so much for spending your afternoon with us here at Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum. Today's program dives deep into the ideas behind our new exhibition, Art of Noise, and into the many ways design has helped shape how we experience music over the past 100 years. From objects and graphics to systems and sound, the exhibition explores music as storytelling, memory, experience, and something deeply multimodal. I'm Alexandra Hodkowski. I'm the curator of public programs here at the museum, and I can tell you we've had a lot of fun putting the programs together and bringing the people that are key parts of these topics together, especially here today. So the program has two parts. Part one focuses on speaker design, and we're joined by four contemporary designers, Deborah Garcia, Yasin, Zoe Mowat, and David Shaw, who work across spatial activation, interior audio environments, and event sound systems. Each will present their work briefly, and then we'll come together for a short conversation about technology, craftsmanship, and what it actually feels like to be in a room with sound. Part two shifts to the visual side of music. Album covers, posters, flyers, and the graphic language that shapes how music lives in our memories forever, whether we like it or not. Paul Raffaele, Barbie Bertish of Love Injection, legendary curator and writer Vince Aletti, and cultural leader Matthew Higgs have brought a bit of a show and tell to explore how music's ephemera has been designed, circulated, collected, and remembered. We'll have time after each part for some questions from the audience. So if you have a burning question, I can come to you with a mic afterwards. And then after we're done, the program ends at 4:30 if we keep on time. But I invite everybody up to see the show. There's two parts. On the third floor is the main part of the show, and then there's also the listening room on the first floor. The exhibition was curated by Joseph Becker, who's the curator of architecture and design at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. And Cindy Trope, who's Cooper Hewitt's associate curator of product design and decorative arts. It was made possible, as you know, these shows take a whole crew and lots of funds to make. So it was made possible by the August Heckshare Exhibition Fund, the Aaron Kranz Fund, the Barbara and Morton Mundell Design Gallery Endowment Fund, the Fisher Arts Impact Fund, and Jonathan Schroeder and Janet Borgerson. In-kind support has been generously provided by Kvadrat Inc. and USM Furniture. Okay, so before we start part one, I'm just going to quickly introduce our guests. You'll first hear from Deborah Garcia, who specializes in sonic and structural disruption. She currently teaches at the Yale School of Architecture and is residency director and curator of the Institute for Public Architecture in New York on Governor's Island. It's worth a trip. You should check it out. Next up, we have Sudanese-American DJ, speaker designer, and event producer Mo Yasin, who will tell us more about his custom-built system inspired by traditions of DIY New York, the UK, and Jamaica, and a decade-long career as a DJ here in New York. And last, Zoe Mowat and David Shaw, founders of Waves and Frequencies, will share more about how industrial design and DJing brought them together to manufacture loudspeakers that bridge acoustic engineering, furniture design, and the social experience of listening. You may have seen a couple items there as you walked in, and you'll have time after to check them out. But two of the Waves and Frequencies speakers are there, and then we also have a device that I'll let Mo tell you more about that's sitting with it that can be activated. Okay, at that, Deborah, let's rock and roll.
All right. Hi, everyone. Very excited to be here and definitely feel like I somehow schemed myself into being in this room with all these great DJs and sound designers, and now I'm suffering the consequences. I'm not a speaker designer or sound designer or a DJ, but maybe have somehow come at sound from a roundabout way, which is architecture. My background is fully in architecture, and I operate mostly as an architectural curator, I would say, and educator. But my personal practice has always been in this kind of space around sonic activation. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the kind of weird sound systems and maybe the kind of energy behind it. I grew up in Los Angeles. My connection to sound has always been about sound as a moving, fleeting, let's say, sort of temporal experience. Lowriders were always a really big part of my growing up, and these are sound systems that are not made to be seen. They're made to be heard before you see them, and by the time you've made it to the window to catch a glimpse, it's around the corner and gone. And that kind of ability of a sound system to be a sort of roving kind of world, a world within a world, has always fascinated me. But also sound that is made to be seen and heard, and the kind of surreal scale of sound systems, how robust and kind of intense they can be, the kind of weirdness that comes when sound becomes architecture, and architecture can really become in and of itself a kind of sound system. And what I ultimately kind of have been after is a sort of what I think of as an aesthetics of capacity. Like, I've always been obsessed with sound systems, sort of presence and form and profile, and the fact that these things are not only incredible technological machines, but they also have form and take up space and make space. So, if my practice were to be thought of as a kind of sound practice, the goal is to inhabit the speaker. This image has always sort of been in my back pocket, which is, from the Paradise Garage days, and, people kind of sitting inside one of Richard Long's speakers has always been kind of floating in my mind, the idea of bringing the body into the speaker. Can we inhabit the system, and can we somehow in that also disrupt systems? So the first one I'll talk about is a project called the Recordar sound system. This project is a lot about feedback loops and a sound system that was both a broadcasting system and a recording system. The origin really came from thinking about the porch and the stoop, and thinking about if we could sit in a sound system, if we could really bring our body to it, what is the kind of form and architectural elements that receive the body already or act as an invitation for the body. And so the porch and the stoop really were kind of floating in my mind. I often work through making kind of small models. I don't really believe in the architectural model as simply a representation of a bigger project or of a future project, but that a model is a kind of interface. And so these were kind of models that were early tests of both kind of small sound objects, but again, blending this kind of porch idea, something that could invite the body, but could also be a sound device. And so different arrangements and thinking about what that could be. This ultimately led to the version of this first sound system this was developed at the MIT School of Architecture in conjunction with the Media Lab there, working with a couple amazing sound designers, and sort of a lot of kind of radical experimentation happens in the Media Lab around sound. But this was a sound system, a charred kind of textural sort of presence on the outside, being able to sit on it, transducers throughout the tower to be able to provide a really kind of tactile, vibrational connection to the sound, and then these two microphones on other ends. So you could approach the speaker, speak into it, and then it would begin to feedback and loop and create a kind of oral atmosphere around it. And so we did some shows with it. This was Nicole Lehulier, who's an amazing vocal artist, and she did a kind of series of activations. But this project has had many lives. It's lived in many different places. It ultimately was installed in Columbus at the Columbus Public Library in Indiana. And there we did a project where we used the sound tower as a kind of vocal box for the building. So we did a series of community recording sessions with this library. We recorded vibrations in the floor, vibrations in windows, the ventilation system, and then the sound system was installed for 3 months at the library, and it would wake up every morning at dawn and every evening at sunset and do a 15-minute inhale at dawn and a 15-minute exhale at sunset. And so, kind of using the sound system almost as an extension of the building, like blending a kind of vocal cord or a voice box to the building, and thinking about, these amazing civic buildings and their, sometimes maybe they're tired, maybe they need a break, maybe they need to take a breath, right? And thinking about this space as now a space for sound bath for the community. And then the last system I'll talk about is SUPA system. This was developed at the Harvard Art Lab. This project was really about a flexible, modular, spatial approach to sound. I have been obsessed with trifold billboards for a long time, and again, this sort of robustness, the kind of superstructural presence of these objects is something that I really gravitated to. But there's so much structure really at the service here of just the surface, of the kind of advertisement or the graphic. And I sort of thought, what if we took this structure and just cracked it open and thought about inhabiting it with sound? So this was the project that we developed. I was lucky to work with Joseph Ziel-Henry, who's an amazing curator and organizer, currently based in Boston, runs arts and culture for the city of Boston. And again, this kind of system that could unfold and be a total sound wall, could kind of 3/4 fold into a theater, and then fully close up to be either a kind of booth, we could really be in or outside of it, gather around and use it in all of its kind of setups. We had a tough time with the system at Harvard. Harvard really couldn't handle the noise levels, and we ran into some issues with campus police and Boston police because of our decibels. So we have a dream to be able to bring this it's like a Ferrari in a gallery, and we're like, we got to get this thing outside. So that's the dream, hopefully other iterations. But we took advantage actually of those constraints and thought about, okay, what else can we do with this? And so we started to clad it, we started to project on it, we kind of thought about then thinking about the system really as a kind of flexible tool for different activations that could be sensory as well. Joseph and Malachi Pearson worked on this amazing film with some dance and choreography work with the piece, using those hinge joints and using the speaker boxes as something that could be moved around. But yeah, I'll end there, maybe with a kind of position at the end and thinking about sound as a tool that I think really lends the ability to think about systems all around us. Like sound systems are really, I think, tools for thinking about systems at large. And that's where I think as a designer, I consider the power of what sound can bring into our lives also as a way to look at the world and to hopefully in that think about more sensory and kind of, bodily ways of being in the world. So thank you.
So yeah, next up we have Mo. Come on up.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Alexandra, and for Cooper Hewitt for having me here. I have to say I feel a little bit awkward being invited to be here, kind of like Deborah, because I'm just a DJ, really, and I don't have any sort of formal design background or engineering background. Everything that I learned was kind of like self-taught, and I figured things out as I went along. So, like I said, I'm a DJ mostly. I've been DJing for a very long time, since I was like 14 years old. DJing professionally in New York since like 2015. And doing a lot of like DIY parties back in the day. During the pandemic, when all of the clubs closed down, my DJ partner at the time and I kind of realized that we needed to figure out something to contribute to the infrastructure of nightlife in New York as clubs were closing down. And we were doing a lot of like DIY parties on like rooftops and basements with kind of like a strung together PA system that wasn't that great. So because I had a lot of time on my hands, I started just learning about first sound system culture, just like educating myself, and then that kind of like led me down the rabbit hole of speaker design. So this was the first thing that I ever built, which was ambitious because again, like I didn't know anything at the time, but we put it together from a bunch of DIY plans. So I didn't design any of the individual cabinets in the system, but I designed the system as a whole, selected the drivers and the tuning, and it's kind of evolved over time. So I'll show you later in the presentation what it looks like now. But this was the first sound system that I ever built, and now it is the permanent system installed in my studio, which I'll talk a little bit more about. So here's another system that I worked on as a commission a couple years ago, and again, I don't really identify as a speaker designer, but occasionally, like, I will take on a commission if it's an opportunity to do something fun or interesting or kind of like challenge myself. So this project was cool. We, my studio partner Booker and I designed this for our friend Lee Walton. It was part of a kind of multimedia art installation where she wrote a book of poetry and recited a portion of that poetry set to some music, like a custom mix that she made to it, and made a record out of that recording. And this system was built to play back that record exclusively. So it was kind of like a holistic kind of multimedia art project that she had in mind and asked us to help with the design for it. So this was a fun one to do. This is a commission for a sound system for Stone Island, which is like a clothing store. This is at their flagship location in Paris. And it's kind of like a thing now that brands want sound systems is because they're like cool looking and whatever. But I'm like, I'm down. Like, you got a budget for me to like, like do something fun. Like, I'm gonna take it. And so this was a fun one because this was the first time that I was able to apply some of the things that I was learning about with audio engineering and loudspeaker design specifically, particularly like horns. So the mid-bass cabinet in this is a custom dual 12-inch Tractrix horn that I designed, and it has these steel ribs on the side to reinforce the cabinet. But a lot of times when you see horns, they'll be enclosed in boxes, and I really wanted to kind of showcase the skeletal nature of the stack as a whole, so you can see the waves travel through it. You can kind of like visualize how the speaker itself is working. So that was kind of the idea with this. And I worked on this stack in collaboration with OMA, who designed the Stone Island store, and they are known for working with this veneer a lot, which is a Notori Satsis veneer made by Alpi, and that's what gives it kind of the dramatic wood grain texture. So it was another fun one. But for me, the main thing that the main reason that I think I'm working with sound systems and what led me to it is club culture and DJing. So I work on like large scale PAs, but parties and event activation is what it's all about for me. So this photo is from a party called Tivoli Sessions that I used to host in East Williamsburg, and that was kind of the first time that I was able to install my system in a space kind of semi-permanently. It was up for like a few months, which meant that I didn't have to move it around, because before that, the system was just in storage, and it was a lot of work to find a place to set it up, move it, like string it up, tune it, put the lights up, promote the party, and then I got like DJ at the end of all that, and like I'm exhausted. So it's nice to be able to have a permanent space to think about like the rest of the experience. And so Tivoli Sessions was the first time that I was really able to start thinking about all of the elements of putting together a party with a custom sound system in a space. And that drove me to want to have a permanent space that the sound system could live in, that I didn't need to worry about the logistics of moving it around and setting it up all the time. So about a year or two later, we found what is now our studio space in East New York on Pitkin Avenue. It's kind of like the East New York-Brownsville border. And when we moved in, it was just like a completely open floor plan. And so we had to do all of the construction in the space. So this photo is when we were building the dance floor from it. We had to level the floor, and we put in a reclaimed wood gym floor that is now our dance floor, which I think is kind of one of the coolest features of the studio, I think. But it was a lot of work to get it to the point that it's at now. So this is what the kind of dance floor portion of the studio looks like. We also have like a full wood shop in there. My studio is in there. But I built a second stack, kind of upgraded some components in the system, and this is what it looks like now. So this system is permanently installed there, and it's kind of just like an experiment zone. So I'm always tweaking stuff. We were kind of like joking backstage that something is always broken when you're an audio person. So I feel like I spend more time fixing things and trying to get it working than I do just like enjoying the system. But it kind of comes with the territory. I was inspired by kind of the classic New York style DJ booths of a lot of media players, a lot of gear in the front. So we have rotary mixers. So this is a booth upstate New York at Dope Jams at Locust Grove. And I took a lot of cues from Dope Jams and just like this tradition of New York style consoles. And so this is a picture of the DJ booth in our studio, kind of in the same style of having floated turntables because we're on the 3rd floor and it's an old building with wooden joist construction, so it bounces a lot. So to be able to play records, we had to float the turntable. So we cut out holes on the table, and they're suspended from rubber bands to isolate from feedback and skipping. And it was kind of I spent like 5 months trying to figure out how to get the records to stop skipping, and this is kind of the only solution. But it works now. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but it works. This is a picture of the inside of Hog Scoop subwoofer, which are the subs in my current system. I think this is really cool because it shows how the sound waves travel through the speaker. And so this is what's called a rear loaded horn subwoofer. So let me go back to the beginning real quick. So those subs are at the bottom here, and the driver is facing outwards, which means that the back wave of the horn is what's loading the driver. It's why we call it a rear-loaded horn. What's tricky about these is you have to do a lot of crazy math. And I didn't design this one myself. I found it and I used it because I thought it was cool. And it sounds pretty good. But the rear of the driver is loaded by the horn, so it travels through this kind of like maze structure and comes out the mouth of the horn and couples with the front. That can cause a cancellation at a certain frequency, and so it's kind of like tricky to work with these horns to like make them sound good. So what I'm working on now is a front-loaded horn, and this is a script that I've been developing with my colleague Ariel to figure out how to fold a horn for low frequencies, because you need them to be really big and large in order for them to play low. But for them to be practical to use and move them around, we fold them. So this is why this is taking this maze structure. But in this case, we are loading the front of the horn. So the driver is inside of a chamber, and it's coming out through that wall on the right side and kind of going up and to the left and out of the mouth. So the bottom graph is that same horn, but unfolded. So we developed this script to help us calculate like how the horn would actually take shape if you were to unfold this. And this allows us to put this into an acoustic simulation program, which is called HornResp. I don't know if there's any like designer nerds out here. But we're using HornResp to like design this low frequency horn. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with the speaker design stuff. I've gotten like a lot deeper than I ever thought that I would, because again, like for me, it's all about activating these things for DJing and for parties. But that is not the design and the sound is not inseparable from how we're actually using it, and it's informed a lot of how I play. I feel like I've evolved a lot as a DJ as I'm starting to understand more about how sound systems work and how speakers work. So it's been a lot of fun, and yeah, thank you.
All right, and our last short presentation is from Zoe and David from Waves and Frequencies.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. We're really excited to be here. Thank you to Alexandra for inviting us and to the Institute for having us. We're Zoe and Dave. We are Waves and Frequencies. Shorthand is WAF Audio. We're two fairly quiet Canadians. We're also really old friends. We met about 17 years ago in Montreal, where we were both living at the time. And we're a relatively new company on paper, but we dreamed up and designed our first speaker about 10 years ago now. And we make speakers and accessories, and we work long distance. So Dave is in the forest of northern Canada in Ontario, and I'm here in New York, in Brooklyn.
So we do design everything that we make in-house, and we also make everything that we sell in-house in our lovely workshop on Lake Superior up in Ontario, where I'm based. And in terms of division of labor, I'll take care of the engineering, and typically I'm the dustier of the two, and Zoe oversees all of our creative direction and design. So by nature of us being physically separated by a long distance, our development process really is kind of a dance, and any idea is kind of like a tennis ball that has to survive being lobbied back and forth between us before it kind of deserves to emerge as a concrete project, really. So anything that comes from our output is really a confluence of kind of both of our backgrounds and experiences in music and design.
And this is our very first speaker sketch that we did about 10 years ago. I think this was in a bar, and it became our very first speaker. So a bit about our origins. We're both DJs, we're both music heads, and we're both industrial designers. We've been informed by many years of dance culture and DIY party culture. I have a background in furniture design. I have my own studio design practice. I've had that for the last 15 years. So I make furniture and lighting, and I'm also an educator. And so this is one of my pieces here. It's a cabinet. It's dyed with indigo ink and produced by a company in Japan. And this is kind of the lens with which I approach waves and frequencies, is sort of seeing audio equipment more as furniture than gear, and sort of seeing how it could integrate into the landscape of a space.
And my professional background is in product design and manufacturing as well, but importantly, there's been kind of a long unbroken thread of organizing events based around music. Since I was a teen in a small city in Northern Ontario, we really had to make our own content to experience. So we were the ones kind of creating these events to experience ourselves. Many years ago, Zoe and I in Montreal renovated an industrial loft together with our partners and built kind of a home for a lot of people in the area based around a tall pair of clip-shorn speakers in our living room. And that memorably led to a lot of nights just simply listening to music with other people. And I feel like that's really a strong part of the DNA of our company. On the left, see something I'm currently involved with. It's a kind of collective of high-fidelity dance events across the globe called Home. And this is a recent party we did in Montreal. Decoration's really important, obviously.
So that's essentially WAF's nervous system. It's sort of what's driving us. It's the core is really music and friendship and collective listening. So this is our first design.
This is the SP1. You might recognize it from the napkin sketch earlier, but this is how it manifested itself. This is kind of a medium-sized floor-standing speaker. In fact, there's an example over there that's an early prototype that's seen some stuff. And it's got an 8-inch woofer, long excursion on the front, and a custom milled aluminum port on the back. And together, that allows for enough airflow for us to tune the box down to 34 hertz, which is deep enough to kind of experience, most of the content that you'd find in contemporary music. And being, able to handle a fair bit of power, it's quite impressive for its size as far as the type of space that it can fill. So we were happy with that first design, how it manifested.
Some features. It was really essential that the aesthetic elements were also functional. So that curved base of the cabinet allows it to tilt back on the metal frame in order to reach your listening position. You can change the appearance as well. You can change up the grills. Those are removable with magnets. You can have different colors. And we're working with textile designers as well on different materials and acoustically transparent textiles. So it was really important for us to integrate thoughtful features into the design.
This is our second and recently launched speaker, a smaller one, the SP2. And while it's about half the size of the other, it was really important that our products share kind of a common DNA in their sound signature. And sound is obviously a notorious thing to try to stick adjectives to describe. So talking about what they sound like is quite tricky. But I think thinking about it for us, the end result of being able to elicit an emotion from the listener is really kind of the overarching goal. And there's something that I've been thinking about as far as speaker design. It's a very split practice between the intuitive and the empirical, and the practice of iterating and testing and revising, goes a certain way, but that last mile, it really is going to be down to the maker's intuition and, for us, our experience in our life living music to understand kind of when it has manifested. What's the last brushstroke on the painting? And for this one, I remember particularly the moment of being in the shop, a certain amount of values putting together in the crossover, and suddenly everything clicked, and I felt the speaker come alive. And I brought it home that night, and my wife and our 3-year-old at the time sat down with them on a coffee table, and I played a song. And for 7.5 minutes, my toddler just sat still, transfixed. And if you've ever been around someone that age, you know that that's a lovely metric as far as how the sound worked out.
So it was a really cool process the second time around, and it was very much that sort of tennis ball going back and forth between us. And we selected drivers not just for the sake of the whatever drivers. We were not just defaulting to standard bookshelf sizes. We were really being intentional with our decisions and really having it be a connection to our first model, the SP1. And so there was a lot of back and forth. It was a really iterative process, and it was this sort of tension between our wishes, what we wanted to do, but then also physics. And at the end of the day, physics is king. And we were really looking at volumes and constrained by certain volumes. And so we made a lot of models, did a lot of testing. This is one of our cardboard models early on. I had it around the house, just sort of sat with it, sort of just to see how it felt within the space on different surfaces. But we probably have a dozen cabinets in the workshop that were rejects in terms of trying to land on the appropriate scale for both physics and aesthetics. And so there's a through line as well with materials, I think, to our first model. There's aluminum, the aluminum waveguide and base, and the selection of colors as well was really important. That we were creating something that was recognizably WAF at the end of the day. And I think the SP2 allowed us to push this aspect of versatility as well. So we're not defined by a certain space. It's sort of space agnostic in that way. We sort of approach it in terms of flexibility and add, there's an option for a riser for our SP2. You can hang it from the ceiling. You can bracket it to a wall or have it on a surface. So what we're doing here is really building a collection with intention to have the most flexibility. And the gestation process is pretty slow, but the end result is something that we really stand behind. So in addition to speakers, we also produce accessories. And it's an opportunity to collaborate with others. Ultimately, it's an excuse to be able to work with friends and people I admire, because that's kind of the best thing at the end of the day is just making things with friends. And so in this way, with these objects, we also create more of a connected universe than just disparate gear. So we do mixed series. We have limited edition runs of record stabilizers, which are pictured here. On the right, it's one done with Chen and Kai. They're an amazing design duo in the city. And it's a glass hemisphere that's been sandblasted from the underside. We develop acoustic fabrics with textile designers, and we have big plans for furniture as well, related to audio.
And so finally, what are we excited about right now? What are we working on for the future? Speaking of gestation periods, we've had something squarely focused on the dance floor, which is where Zoe and I are both very at home. This is a 32-inch wide fiberglass horn that we've been developing with the aerospace engineering department at a college where I live. And it's going to manifest in the next couple of months as a large-scale club installation in Montreal, particularly as something called a multiple entry horn. Basically, we attach drivers that produce different frequency ranges to very specific parts of that same horn, and using attention to detail and a lot of math, we can basically have them be aware of each other and cooperate to produce a singular waveform that comes out of the speaker about the size of a tennis ball from its origin. So it really is the experience of kind of listening to a pair of headphones in public, and can be quite a profound experience. So yeah, we've got a 4-point system with a large boundary-coupled subwoofer array about the size of this wall. And if you're popping up to Montreal anytime, that'll be at Le Système. So truthfully, we're just super excited to share more good sound with more people. And thank you for listening.
We're just going to bring some chairs up real fast for the conversation. Give us 1 minute. So that was amazing. Thank you so much. I think we all learned just like tip of the iceberg of all of what you do in the years that you've put into it so far. I have 3 questions that I just want to ask you to get a little deeper, but also hear more about your experience. I don't know if there's any aspiring speaker designers or people that are already at practice, but I thought we'd start with a question that is kind of like an opener sometimes. You know, sometimes when you can't get something right, it opens new possibilities. But on the more technical side of something that's been like the biggest challenge technically in your designs so far, and maybe Mo, we'll start with you. Like, what has been the biggest like kind of thing that has maybe held you back, but also kind of opened up new possibilities in your work?
I'm gonna skirt your question a little bit, because the biggest challenge that I faced is in activating the system, and not so much about using it or designing it technically. I kind of fumbled my way into putting it all together, and we've iterated over that system over like a few years, and I'm pretty happy with where it's at right now. And but the whole point of having a sound system practice for me is to evolve and refine and learn and tweak and do all of those things. So when I run into things that I like can't figure out, or it's all just like learning, and it's fun. So there's been like small things that have been like frustrating to like learn about, and there's been big learning curves and figuring out how all of this stuff works. But what is the most challenging, and also what's most important for me, is kind of like the social side of it, is how to bring people together, how to articulate what it means to have a sound system practice, how to make that make sense to people, and throw parties and curate experiences in a way that's like meaningful for people, and building the system, getting a spot was just like the beginning of that. Like making the system functional was when I was able to start working on that. So I feel like I'm at the very beginning of figuring out how to like make it meaningful for people, and that's been the biggest challenge.
Yeah, it probably takes a long time on the social side. Yeah, years in the making that evolves. What about you, Deborah? Biggest technical issue you've come across?
Technical beef.
Yeah.
What do I have beef with? Yeah, I think I'm gonna say like hinges, which maybe doesn't make a lot of sense, but in that last, in the super system project, that's all about kind of this aluminum framework with speaker boxes kind of embedded in it. So much about sound design is about soundproofing, which sounds kind of, at odds, but it's really about like so much about joinery and any kind of additional move that you make on a sound system essentially opens you up for disruption in the way that the system works. Mm-hmm. Of course, I mean, there's so many differences between like hi-fi and the way that that's approached in systems that, every component essentially kind of leads to the way that sound is sort of produced. My systems are a lot dirtier, and like if there's a lo-fi or like a low-res version, that's definitely the place where I'm operating. And like gaps for me and places where things kind of like vibrate and produce like hissing or kind of vibration is not necessarily like the rattle, exactly. The rattle is not a bad thing, but you have to tune the rattle. The rattle can't also, the rattle can't like, get in the way of the party. It can't get in the way of can't get in the way of the theatrics and experience. You have to tune the rattle. And I mean, there's something really amazing in Devin Turnbull's installation here, where the AC system has like a grill on it to help work with this kind of dampening. And I was like, that is hot. That is cool. That is like exactly this like tuning of the rattle, tuning of the moment where you have surfaces coming together, joinery, hardware. So the hinge is an ongoing beef. I think that that's something that I would love another go at, but ultimately I think when sound becomes spatial, you're really opening yourself up for all of these small challenges where material comes together, and it's both the kind of, thing that keeps you up at night and is an exciting challenge.
Yeah, the space, so that kind of leads us to two things. One is like the body, which we're going to touch on, and one is like bringing people into the space. But the space, as you may have seen, we're in a building that was built, I think it was 1902, like 100, like very 100 plus years old building, and putting a contemporary sound system in that building, you can imagine, has all sorts of challenges, including the vent, which, by the way, is like one of the main vents that helps circulate the entire building. So,
of course.
But I think leading into the body, I think all of you really need to take into account how a body, two bodies, or 100 bodies are experiencing a speaker or speakers that are linked together. So maybe Zoe, David, you could start out just by talking about how you've thought about that, or maybe some experiences that have come up.
Sure, I can start. I think you can talk at length about sound and the body, but when we're talking about the hardware, speakers, and the body, for us, just from a basic level, from a design perspective, that's always the starting point, and it's just baked into the entire process. As a designer with 15 years of furniture practice, that is always my reference point. I'm always starting in a space with a body and that user's experience. And so a bookshelf speaker is designed for a bookshelf, but we kind of approach it differently from the ground up and sort of design from there, from a person, from a space. And I think in the end, it's just more human that way. I was going to be a sculptor, but decided to be a designer at the last second just because there is that kind of intimate relationship with objects, with materials. That one-to-one scale is just so, it's so intimate, like the chair is the most intimate thing. And I even remember one of the first pieces of furniture I made, it turned out unwittingly to be like a self-portrait. It was exactly my height, and it had these legs, these sort of stilts. It was a cabinet, and I didn't realize.
Somehow you were thinking about your body.
Yeah, just it was like in reference to my body. And so, again, that's just always baked into the process and very much what we are interested in when we're creating things.
I'm fond of, I think, something that's happened when we've been bringing our speakers to life, in that they manifest in a way that, to me, they feel like another body in the space that you're kind of sharing that experience with. They're, almost little creatures, but it's truthfully like the most active type of furniture that you can have in your house. And it's such an intimate experience that you have with music, building something that has that intimacy and being responsible for building something that plays somebody's music, that is a huge consideration. It's a big responsibility too.
Yeah, they almost have an aura, right? But they also have a history of where they've been. Like, if only they could talk and tell us something. Within that history, Mo, I know you are inspired by multiple cultural sound systems. For example, Jamaican sound systems. How has that played into your designs?
Yeah, so I am not an audiophile, right? And what I mean by that is I don't ascribe to the idea that, and just personally for me and how I approach it, I'm not that concerned about fidelity, strictly speaking. And for me, the speaker system, the sound system, is an instrument with which to express myself, and it is a part of the process. And I think that's kind of the big revelation of Jamaican sound system culture and dub music, and what that's contributed to a lot of the music that we listen to now. So for me, sound system culture is about thinking about the role of the sound system and the music that we play, and having that be like an active part of it. So it's kind of a feedback loop. The music that we're playing is coming out of the speakers, and that is informing how we think about the music and how we think about the speakers. And it's all kind of just like a feedback loop. So
like, you can't take them apart.
You can't take them apart. And for me as a DJ, like, I think of ourselves, like, I think of the role of a DJ as we are sampling records live, or we're sampling music live and playing samples. So every time that you play a record on a sound system, that's like a recreation of that recording. And I think that there is no original event that ever happened. I don't know if I'm getting like too abstract here. But I think with the hi-fi approach, there's this mentality that there is there was a recording that we are trying to play back with perfection. But the way that music is made now is like there was no original event. Even if you have two microphones that capture performance, like, those are happening from two different locations, and oftentimes you're overdubbing things, so there's no like place in time or space that the musical event happened at that you could then recreate. And for me, I take that a step further when I'm thinking about DJing, because like we're putting records together and we're manipulating them pretty aggressively. So like the idea of fidelity goes out the window when I start adding effects to it, when I start changing the pitch. So then I take that same idea like one step further and start thinking about what is the role of the sound system in that experience and what I'm trying to express in putting these records together. And that's kind of I think the Jamaican tradition of sound system culture is where that idea originated from.
And you'll see too, on the table over here, we have a long strip of metal, which is not just metal. Can you just quickly tell us what that is? Because I feel like that goes along with the manipulation.
Yeah, for sure. I made a dub siren. And we can play with it after this. It's in the front, and it's just like a little noisemaker, a little synthesizer that we will play with during parties to add effects and noise and excitement. But that's like directly from the kind of like reggae sound system tradition that we use in our parties now too.
Cool. And so cool that it got hooked up to your speakers.
And it's hooked up to their speakers, yeah.
Okay, last question is for you, Deborah. So moving from the body to the community, I know that you are really focused on spatial activation, but in your practice, how has that brought people to you? How do you get to know them? How do you do they experience it like you want them to? Do they keep in touch? The real community aspect of these sound systems.
Yeah, I feel like I definitely will harken back to what Mo sort of talked about in terms of building community around systems is a long game, and I think building community in any sense is a sort of ongoing feedback loop of sort of keeping at it and building culture around things. I think for me in particular, a lot of my work currently has dealt with being the residency director of the Institute for Public Architecture on Governor's Island, and we operate on an abandoned island. It's an abandoned military base. It's right off the coast of Fidei. And it's become a kind of place for arts organizations to go out there and have artist residencies and different sort of events. And this year, for example, we threw a party actually with a sound system that Mo brought, and we had this moment where it was like it's building from scratch, right? It's about activating site.
Sorry, I don't want to take credit where it's not due. My studio mate built that system. It wasn't mine.
Booker will see this later, and then he'll know.
It was also raining like crazy, right? Which is like another factor.
It was raining like crazy, which is the biggest fear of putting your audio equipment out in the environment. And of course, on this island, weather changes by the second, and people are coming out for the first time to kind of be like, "What's up? What's going on out here?" And then you encounter this insane beast of a sound system in the middle of all these abandoned buildings. And it was really a kind of labor of love, but a vision of what we could do, which is, can we just shake the dust out of this place a little bit and bring people out and maybe begin to build a sense of a rhythm here? Will we do it again? Will this happen again? What will it look like next time? What can we begin to kind of build the sort of cycle of thinking about the sound activation from? So, I think as I've done this a couple more times, like the project that I did in Columbus, Indiana at the public library was another good example of that, where people operate with this building every day. Libraries are like the workhorse of community civic buildings, right? Like I was raised in a library in the summer. My parents couldn't afford childcare after school to the library. Like they're really like these infrastructures of care, and people went in and out of this building every day. You're going in, you're doing this thing, and then all of a sudden, to have a sound activation in a space that typically isn't activated that way, I mean, people are just hanging out and spending time and like laying near the tower, total safety hazard outside of the entrance of the library. But all of a sudden, your relationship bodily and kind of conceptually to the building changes. And so my hope is that when I think about sound activation, it's a way to recontextualize your relationship to the built environment. And I think I always go back to this term, like the only good system is a sound system. Like it's a great example of a system that is constantly falling apart, constantly a labor of love, but is a great metaphor for the way that systems need to be active, living, breathing things. There's no perfect system, and any system can be undone if you open that kind of door to it. So for me, it's a kind of ongoing work.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for that. They also make us move and dance, which we don't have time to get into too much, but I know a lot of us out here like to dance too. So we're going to take 2 questions from the audience, and then just so you know, we'll take a 5-minute intermission, but do not go far because we are going to start promptly. So we're going to just reset the stage and welcome our next group. But first, a couple questions from the audience.
I wanted to get back to music. I'm just curious for each of you, when you finish a system, when you're happy with it, what's the first music that you want to put on? Each of you.
That's a great question. Okay, let's start. Dave, Zoe, why don't you start? We'll go to the left.
I have a whole playlist, and it's kind of just a special thing when you turn it on and it's alive and active, and someone, oftentimes we've got these speakers in spaces in places that don't normally have hi-fi, and the person sort of hears sound for the first time. And I remember doing that with a friend, and we were listening, and I said, "You've got, you're up," and she chose a Depeche Mode song.
Yes.
And I put it on, and I was even just streaming it through my phone through the amp. And she said that this isn't the right song. It's like, no, this is it. This is actually how you're supposed to be hearing it. And she just kind of, yeah. So that I think it's really who you're, playing it to that matters. Like, it's their pick. Yeah.
A similar story. I don't have a exact song. I have a playlist, I think, that's hooked up to the speaker demos over there. But we had a party a couple of Christmases ago that's historically in a friend's dad's woodworking shop out in the country, and I brought a couple of our first speakers there that were just very, very basic and rough, and they were too heavy to carry, and I left them there for a couple of weeks, I realized, and my friend's dad had hooked them up to his CD player, and he told me, he said, I put on this Joni Mitchell CD that I've heard for 20 years, and I sat down, and he's like, I cried. He said, I hadn't heard it like that ever before, even though I'd heard it 1,000 times. And I think being able to give people those moments, what a profound opportunity to have people emotionally react to something that you're providing them with.
Yeah. Okay, Depeche, Joni, Mo, what about you? What do you play?
It kind of depends what type of system it is and what it's for. Usually it's whatever is the nearest record to me. But I can think of two tracks that I play very regularly on new systems. Number one is King in My Empire by Rhythm and Sound. It's beautifully recorded. It's like one of my favorite tracks, and I know it really well. It's just like masterfully engineered, and the bass on it is a really telltale sign if you got it right or not. And then the second one is Willie Hutch, Now That It's All Over. More of an acoustic recording, less electronic element or no electronic elements in it, but comes in with like a long string intro, and then a vocal comes in. Both of the tracks are like kind of minimal, so it gives me kind of a sense of space and balance. And when a song is too busy, I think it's harder for me to figure out what's going on with it. So those are my two reference tracks.
Deborah?
Yeah, similarly, I think a good rattle finder is always James Blake. Subs will get pushed to their limit pretty quickly. And then for my listening pleasure, Lauryn Hill always on any soundtrack.
Super. Okay, one more question from the audience, if anyone has one.
I just want to know if I think Mo mentioned that you were using software for design. Any other software that you would recommend?
Yes, there are so many, and I feel like every time I start a project, there's like a new thing that I need to learn, and it's really frustrating. I use HornResp for horn design, particularly like bass horns, and Vitwix CAD, and WinISD, and Acrobat. There's so many. There's like a million speaker design softwares. The main two that I'm using are HornResp and Vitwix CAD.
Anybody else? Any other software?
No, that covers it. You can get very far with those two, and then add in a free measurement software to confirm all of your guesses, like REW or Room EQ Wizard. Invest in an inexpensive USB microphone, and you can go really far.
Okay, well, at that, we're going to give a huge round of applause and reset the stage. Thank you so much.